Here we will show you how to change firmware of LED Tuya smart bulb with BK7231 based Wi-Fi module so that it can be connected to Home Assistant. Presentation will include an easy method to desolder Wi-Fi module with cheapest soldering iron, flux, solder wick and extra PB solder. No hot air gun is required. Used materials were recorded by a friend from a forum. I will present them in processed form. Video has been also split into chapters for easier navigation. Let's start by removing the dome. In the Tuya products, it is very easy to remove. Using a little strength should be enough. Next, pull off the board with LEDs. First, remove the glue. Then, it's best to pry, preferably with two flat screwdrivers from both sides. This is the board with LEDs. There are two types of white LEDs, warm white and cold white, and one type of RGB LEDs. Next, remove the thread. It is easily removable. It's not soldered to the wires. The thread on the underside contains a pin. That pin can be removed with a knife. You can just pry it. It will be needed to put back on the thread after the operation is finished. Now you can remove the board from the inside. Remove the tape from around the board. In this case, the sticker from the Wi-Fi module has gone together with the tape, but we don't need it for anything. You can already see the Wi-Fi module and the power supply circuit. Now it's time to desolder the Wi-Fi module. First, put the flux on the pads. Also, add some extra PB solder. It has to be one with a low melting temperature to help with the soldering. We do not recommend using PB-free solder. When applying the solder, it is important to heat the pads with soldering iron and apply the solder to the pad. Do not aim the solder at the soldering iron tip. Warm up carefully all solder pads at once until the module falls off. Do not use force because then it can tear off the pads and track with the module. Then only lift the module when it is already floating, not earlier. Then clean the pads from the solder using a solder wick wire. In the video, some solder splashed onto the lower PCB. It can also be easily cleaned. Here is the desoldered Wi-Fi module. Its pinout is now shown on the screen. First, add the flux, whiten the pads, and then prepare the wires. Use the popular type of wires that are compatible with breadboards. Before soldering, the soldering tip should be clean. When you solder, put the tinned wire on the tin pad and heat it up. Move the soldering tip aside and do not move the wire. The solder must solidify. Now we will put the rest of the programming circuit on the breadboard. Make connections according to the diagram on the screen. Jumper between VCC and 3.3 volt selects the voltage level. 5 volt would damage the Wi-Fi module. Now connect the UART and 3.3-volt power supply. Connecting power from the separate USB power supply allows you to easily reboot the Wi-Fi module by disconnecting and reconnecting the power. First, you should make a firmware backup. This can be done in BK Writer or in Hit Download Pi. In BK Writer, start the reading with the Read Flash button and then reset the system by cutting off the power only for a fraction of a second. The first time flashing may fail. The timing is crucial. You have to try several times. You can also use the second reset method, shortening scene signal to ground for a fraction of a second, but this requires soldering the wire to the scene pad. Now, the second way to back up the firmware is Hit Download Pi. The flash read command is on the screen. Checksum error can be ignored. Links to the programs are in the video description. Writing the firmware is done in the same way. Again, it might take several attempts to work. Remember, power cycle should be done when the program is waiting for getting bus. After uploading the firmware, a Wi-Fi access point should be created with the name based on the MAC address of the device. There, in the Config Wi-Fi tab, we can enter the information for our Wi-Fi network, password, and SSID. After setting them, the device will reboot and join our network. New IP of the device can be found on the website of our router in the DHCP logs. Log in there and check DHCP tab. The beacon device should be listed. If you want a static IP, you can reserve the device in DHCP some IP for its MAC. The device outputs are configured in the Module tab. They differ depending on what device you have. RGBCW lamp requires setting the 5 PWMs. PWM pin roll is available only on selected pins. After setting pin rolls, you can control the light in two modules, RGB mode and temperature mode, warm and cold white. But the module is still outside the lamp. It's time to unsolder the wires, clean the pads with a solder wick and put the bulb together. Also use PCB cleaner to clean the board before soldering. Add flags on the pads and also add solder to one of the pads. This pad will be used to keep the module in place and then solder remaining pads. When applying the solder, it is important to heat the pads with soldering iron and apply the solder to the pad. Remove possible short circuit by dragging the tip over the pads. As last resort, you can see solder wick. All pads must be soldered. Clean the module after soldering. If necessary, wrap the module with a tape. Put it in its place in the housing. Put the thread on. Put on the pin from the bottom of the thread. Connect the LED boards Finally, you can stick the dome. It's time for the final test of operation. The camera and the LEDs themselves do not perfectly reflect the colors, but the bulb works without a doubt. Now you can pair the lamp with the Home Assistant. See our forum for more information about that. On Electroda, we have IoT teardowns section with teardowns of various smart devices. If you have an interesting device using ESP or BK or any other IC, you can briefly describe it, do a teardown, take some photos from the inside, present its functionality, and paste it here. See details in the video description. See you on the forum.